Behind every successful woman is a tribe of other successful women who have her back. This Women's History Month, Talk of the Town pays tribute to the Filipino women who blazed trails and continue to blaze trails so their fellow women can take their rightful place under the sky. We believe that humanity as a whole can only succeed when half of us are not held back. Talk of the Town takes a look at women's challenges, successes, and push for societal changes. We shine the spotlight on and show support to Filipino comfort women. We pay tribute to Filipinas who led revolts, revolutions, and resistances, and express admiration to Filipinas who are taking their places in leadership positions. We also take stock of the 500th anniversary of Magellan's landing in the Philippines. Here's our hosts, Nair Martinez and Chris Godinez.
Good evening and welcome to episode 4 of Talk of the Town, coming to you live on your lifestyle and knowledge sharing channel, PinoyLife.net. This is your host, Nair Martinez, and we are also streaming live on Facebook. So go ahead and ask your friends to log on and join us. Tonight's episode is dubbed Women on the March, Trials, Triumphs, and Transformation. This is a nod to March as Women's History Month. We're excited to speak with two empowered women, but also empower others because athletes, not by coincidence, both of them are educators. First, author Evelina Galang, who worked extensively with Filipino comfort women, and also joining us to advocate for affordability, food, and nutrition is Deirdre Levy, who is currently seeking a seat on the New York City Council in Brooklyn. Here to tell you what else we have for you tonight is my co-host, Chris Godinez.
We are glad you joined us for tonight's episode of Women on the March, Trials, Triumphs, and Transformation. A recording of tonight's episode will be available on Facebook/PinoyLife.net and on YouTube. We have a lot in store for you tonight. We are happy to have New York University professor Luis Francia, who will talk to us about the 500th anniversary of Magellan's landing in the Philippine Islands. We also have a musical performance for you tonight by the multi-talented Krizia Daya. But before anything else, we'll kick off tonight's episode with the headlines in the Philippines and in the Filipino community in the U.S. with Philippine Daily Mirror editor Ricky Rillera. Here is Balitaan.
Good evening. This is Ricky Rillera from News Desk. Here are our top stories. A Brazil variant of COVID-19 called P1 has its first case in the Philippines. According to scientists, this variant has now been found in at least 20 countries. It can reinfect people who previously recovered from COVID-19. They estimated that this virus type was 1.4 to 2.2 times more transmissible than the initial form of the virus. The Department of Health also reported 59 new cases of the more contagious United Kingdom variant. Based on World Health Organization data, the Philippines has reported the highest number of total cases among Western Pacific countries. Second was Japan, and third, Malaysia. With this spike in virus incidents, despite ongoing vaccinations, Metro Manila, the capital region, is again bracing itself for enhanced restrictions. Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Chair Benhar Abalos has set up border controls and a common curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., which began on Monday, March 14. The Supreme Court of the Philippines has ruled that legitimate children have the right to adopt their mother's surname, citing the state's commitment to ensure gender equality. The decision, penned by Associate Justice Marvic Leonen, reversed rulings of the Court of Appeals and the Regional Trial Court of Zamboanga City. Both denied a request for a change of surname of a petitioner whose mother had raised him and his siblings by herself alone. The High Tribunal stressed that the fundamental equality of women and men is guaranteed by the Constitution. It pointed to Article 2, Section 14, which Quote, implies the state's positive duty to actively dismantle the existing patriarchy by addressing the culture that supports it, unquote. Also, the court noted that the Philippines is a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It also cited that the RTC's application of Article 364 of the Civil Code as incorrect, saying that while the provision states that legitimate children should principally use the surname of the father, principally does not mean exclusively. Accordingly, where the text of a law allows for an interpretation that treats women and men more equally, that is the correct interpretation, the decision said. On another note, Senator Christopher Go, a close ally of President Duterte, has brushed aside reports that he was being considered to run as the standard-bearer of the ruling PDP-Laban party. He said his focus now was to continue serving the people as a senator until his term ends in 2025. In a recent interview, he said he was not interested in the presidency. However, he welcomed a recent Pulse Asia poll in which prospective voters showed preference for the tandem of Go as president and President Rodrigo Duterte as his running mate. The PDP-Laban recently released a resolution urging Duterte to consider a vice presidential run in 2022. Go said that if Duterte agreed to run as vice president, he might consider his stand. Senator Manny Pacquiao, the acting president of the PDP-Laban, said that the resolution was not authorized. Meanwhile, at a recent women's virtual meeting in New York, despite the denial of Vice President Leni Robredo, she was not running for president, her ardent backer from New York said she was supporting Robredo's run just as she supported the presidential run of U.S. President Joe Biden. In New York, film subway victim Noel Quintana, who was slashed in the face, said the suspect has been identified, arrested, and arraigned in court. The suspect was arrested on a separate case and was also identified as the same person in Quintana's case. Quintana has since been invited to share his story in several Asian American events, denouncing the rising violence against Asians, particularly the elderly, across the United States. Besides Quintana, 74-year-old Juanito Falcon, a Filipino grandfather who was punched in the face in Phoenix, Arizona, later died of his injuries. U.S. President Joe Biden condemned the vicious and un-American attacks on Asian Americans during his first primetime address to the nation on Thursday, March 11. According to the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center, the community has recorded nearly 3,000 accounts of xenophobia, racism, and harassment from March to December 2020. The United States, through the U.S. Agency for International Development and the Philippine Department of Education, have signed a new 4.8 billion pesos assistance agreement to improve basic education outcomes in the Philippines. The 5-year bilateral agreement will deepen the commitment between the U.S. aid and Department of Education to help children and out-of-school youth acquire the education and skills they need to succeed. The agreement is one of 4 new assistance agreements between the U.S. and the Philippines launched in 2020 and 2021, totaling 32.7 billion pesos or 675 million over 5 years. The other agreements were signed with the Philippine Department of Health, the Philippine Department of Finance, and the National Economic and Development Authority. Back to you, Chris and Ned.
Thank you, Ricky. Our next segment is dedicated to women survivors, the Filipino comfort women who are still in the thick of the fight for a public apology and reparation from the Japanese government. Worse, even the Philippine government refuses to acknowledge their status as wartime survivors of systemic sexual violence. Talk of the Town guest Evelina Galang is a professor at the University of Miami. She conducted research on the lives and struggles of the Filipino comfort women for more than 20 years. She wrote the book Lola's House, Filipino Women Living with War. It is a creative nonfiction work documenting the testimony of 16 surviving Filipino comfort women. Now, let's welcome Evelina.
Evelina, welcome to Talk of the Town, and it's great to have you on our show. I know last week we talked a little bit about, we wanted to learn more about your books and the comfort women. I do have one quick question for the statement, the phrase comfort women. Comfort is like kind of derogatory, isn't it?
Yes. Hi. Well, good evening, and thank you for having me tonight, and for wanting to share the stories of the Lolas with our community. Stories that have, for far too long, have been absent in our history books. So, comfort women were women that the Japanese Imperial Army took, systematically kidnapped and raped and placed into military sex slave camps. So when we refer to comfort women, it's not because we are talking about how they are comforting to their soldiers, but it's actually it's a sign of the kind of military systematic rape that they were put into. Comfort women for 2 weeks to 2 years were taken and placed into comfort stations. In the Philippines, these comfort stations were they were kind of makeshift stations. So they were churches, they were civic centers, they were homes, people's homes. And in our Philippines, they estimate over 1,000 of our Lolas were taken. They were girls back then, 8 years old, 12 years old. About 1,000 of them were taken and placed into these military sex slave camps. So the term comfort is not really, when I say comfort women, I put air quotes, not about that. It's about really distinguishing the difference between those who had been sexually abused, raped in general, which we know that happens all the time, and World War II.
Thank you for that enlightening explanation. So, Evelina, you mentioned, or like your research spans 20 years or more. What inspired you, or what motivated you to research about these comfort women?
Right. So I had heard about the comfort women and their plight, and I was actually working on a screenplay, research for a screenplay. I had brought several of my 20-something students. There were 5 of us. 2 of them were high school girls, and 3 were in their 20s. And we had gone to interview the Lolas, not so much to interview them, but to be with them and to see them, to get a sense of what their lives were like. But we were very respectful. We didn't want to quote, interview them. We wanted to just get to know them. And on the 8th week, when we were leaving, several of the Lolas from Liga ng mga Lolang Filipina, the women that I was working with, came up to us and said, "Evelina, when are you going to tell our stories?" And they asked to be interviewed, and they asked for their stories to be told. So this is how I came to Lola's house.
Interesting. Evelina, this comfort women, I know in our intro, like there is lack of acknowledgement, especially also from the government, that they are actually war survivors. So do you know what's being done at the moment? Is there a call for justice, maybe?
Well, what's really beautiful about the survivors, especially the Filipina survivors, they were the very first survivors to come out on their own behalf, to call for reparations, to call for a formal apology, and to call for their stories to be laid out in history books, in textbooks. And so here I see that Lola's house is coming up here. They were the very first to do that, and they went to the courts. They gave their testimonies. They asked for their apology. They have not received it. They asked for the Philippine government to support them and to speak on their behalf, and that has yet to happen. So to this day, so many of the Lolas have now passed away. They have yet to hear that apology, that formal apology. They have yet to see reparations. And now we see the active erasure of their stories, of their experiences of war being done by the Japanese government. So it's so important then for us to hear their stories, for us to understand what happened during World War II. The Lolas, they speak their stories and they relive that trauma again and again. And they do it because they want to make sure that it never happens again. They do it for the young women who are on the show tonight. They do it for our grandchildren. They do it for our sisters and our mothers, worried that what happened to them might happen to us. So these pictures here that you're seeing are some of the Lolas who gave their testimonies for Lola's house. And the pictures that you see are pictures of them either here, Lola Carmencita, this is the house where she was held during World War II, that comfort station. And then here we are at one of the marches. But many of those photographs are either at the sites where they were abducted or the sites where they were held.
Wow. Evelina, can I ask you something?
Sure.
When you spoke to the survivors, what did you come away with as a gain in their effort to come forward and tell their story? What was it that we gained, in terms of our position as women in Philippine society, and as people who experienced war as badly as anybody, and probably worse because this was systemic.
Right, this was systemic. And you have to remember that when we talk about the trauma that they survived, they weren't raped once. They were raped repeatedly. And they were several times a day. And then depending on how long they were held in those comfort stations, 2 weeks, 2 months, a year. So I think that when they did come forward, they were maybe a little timid at first, right? Mm-hmm. But as they released their stories and as they shared with all of us the experiences that they had, they went from being these victims of war to survivors, and you can see through the ways. And I know that many people in the Philippines will know those images of the Lolas at the marches. They got stronger and stronger, and they went from being even survivors to advocates for women. They went, and then from there, I think that they are superheroes. To me, they are the ultimate feminist, the strong woman who will give everything for the sake of their daughters, for the sake of their granddaughters. They tell these stories that are so shameful to them, so that it won't happen again. So I think that's one of the beautiful things that has come out of their coming forward. A lesson in the way truth speaks to power.
Thank you. So Evelina, thinking forward, how do we increase the consciousness of their existence, and are there like websites where we can ask our viewers to log into so they can
well, I think that if you could Liga ng mga Lolang Filipina, which is an umbrella or an extension of Gabriela, is on Facebook. They're on Facebook, and they're also, I think definitely you can find them there, and they're also on Twitter. But they are the organization of survivors, and now many of their children and their grandchildren have taken up the fight because, of the 16 women in Lola's house, all have passed away save one. So now their children and their grandchildren have taken up the fight. So I think if you find Liga ng mga Lolang Pilipina, Lila Pilipina, that would be a great place to start. I know that there's another book that they have recently produced with a couple other students and a press there in the Philippines called "My Mother Was More Than a Comfort Woman." There are those different kinds of literature out there and videos out there about the women, and I think that the most important thing that we can do is we can start teaching these stories, reading these stories in the classroom, and we have several memorials that have been put up in different parts of the United States and in the Philippines that have suffered under the Japanese power to take them out, to dismiss them. And so what we can do is we can at least do the third thing that the Lolas wanted, which is to have them in our history books, have them in our classrooms, and teach our children about this history.
Maybe teach this as part of Philippine history in all schools in the Philippines.
I think it's happening. I think that there's a lot of that happening, but even more so, I think on a more regular basis, yes.
Yeah.
And here in the United States as well. I know California has begun has created a curriculum, and they are teaching it in the California systems. So we are bringing the comfort woman story, the Korean story, the Chinese and the Filipino and the Malaysian to the classrooms, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
But Evelina, that is very inspiring, enlightening, and thank you very much for being our guest on this show. And congratulations on your research. It's really inspired a lot of women to take up the cause for this Lolas.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Evelina.
And now we will move on to our next segment. Thank you, Evelina, once again for sharing the stories of our Lolas. In our next segment, ITIS, Immigration Troubles, Immigration Solutions with attorney Chris Godinez.
This is Immigration Troubles, Immigration Solutions, ITIS It Is, with attorney Chris Godinez.
The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service will stop implementing the Trump-era public charge rule that became a major obstacle for green card applicants. A person is considered a public charge if she receives cash assistance or long-term care to survive in the U.S. She will be considered inadmissible and will not be issued a visa or a green card. Under the Trump rule, persons applying for a green card or for an extension or change of non-immigrant status will be required to satisfy an expanded public charge test, which includes completing a detailed declaration of self-sufficiency form and the submission of many documents. These documents must show household income, bank or retirement accounts, real estate holdings, liabilities, recent credit score reports, health care coverage, use of public benefits, and educational and occupational background, among others. This Trump public charge rule was widely criticized for being a wealth test that excluded would-be immigrants on the basis of financial capacity. Many green card applicants are expected to benefit from the revocation of this public charge rule. Although the Department of Homeland Security announced that it will stop defending this public charge rule in court, certain states may still continue to ask the courts to reinstate it. If successful, the DHS may be compelled to implement the Trump public charge rule again. Contact your immigration attorney or accredited legal service provider to find out how the recent changes in the public charge rule may affect your USCIS applications. President Biden ended the twice extended Trump visa ban that prevented thousands of immigrants from coming to the U.S. This means immigrants who were petitioned by their families or employers or those who qualified under the diversity visa lottery may now come to the United States. Nearly all legal immigration was halted when President Trump issued a proclamation suspending the entry of immigrants and non-immigrants because they pose a threat to the U.S. labor market during the pandemic. The Trump visa ban disrupted economic recovery efforts and kept thousands of families apart. More than 120,000 family-based visas were lost during fiscal year 2020. Two other Trump anti-immigration policies still need to be similarly withdrawn by President Biden. First is the non-immigrant visa ban. For now, the rule halting the entry of those coming to the U.S. temporarily to work is still in effect at least until the end of March. Second is the healthcare insurance for immigrants. Immigrants are currently required to show that they will purchase health insurance within 30 days of entering the U.S. or that they have sufficient funds to pay for anticipated medical expenses when they enter the United States.
One of the requirements for naturalization as a U.S. citizen is successfully passing the U.S. Civics and History test during the interview. Since 2008, this meant applicants reviewed a set of 100 questions and answers and be ready to answer 6 out of 10 questions correctly. But on December 1, 2020, the USCIS implemented a stricter requirement for passing the civics test. Naturalization applicants who filed on or after December 1, 2020 were required to review 128 questions and be ready to answer 12 out of 20 questions correctly. This 12 out of 20 requirement was effectively revoked by the USCIS on March 1, 2021, and the 6 out of 10 requirement was restored. In effect, the 6 out of 10 requirement will apply to the following: those who filed their N-400s before December 1, 2020, those who filed on or after March 1, 2021, and those whose initial interview is scheduled on or after April 19, 2021, regardless of the filing date. Those who filed between December 1, 2020 and February 28, 2021, and whose initial interview is scheduled before April 19, 2021, have the choice to take the test under the stricter 12 out of 20 or the less stringent 6 out of 10 requirement. To find out if you're covered by the 6 out of 10 requirement or if you have the choice to take the stricter 12 out of 20 requirement, check the filing date of your N-400 application for naturalization. And that's your immigration solution for an immigration trouble. Watch out for our next ITIS with Attorney Chris on immigration troubles with cannabis or marijuana.
Thank you for that immigration update, Attorney Chris. Very enlightening, very informational. And now in our next segment, we zoom in on the mothers of Philippine history. These are the women who fought for independence and freedom. And here with our history rewind with Professor Noel Pangilinan.
May tungkulin ka sa pagpapalaya ng bayan.
In celebration of Women's History Month, we would like to pay tribute to brave Filipinas who in various stages of Philippine history not only joined but led revolts, revolution, and resistance. We are joined tonight by students from the College of Mount St. Vincent in New York City who will talk about women leaders who helped give birth and nurture the Filipino nation. And speaking of the College of Mount St. Vincent, did you know that CMSV is the alma mater of former Philippine President Corazon Aquino, the first woman president of the Philippines? Here's our quick look at the mothers of history.
Rachaela Cain was born on January 6, 1812 in Barrio Pandan, Caloocan. She's one of the few women who bravely joined the Katipunan during the 1896 revolution against Spanish colonialism. Affectionately called Tandang Sora and the mother of Balintawak, she's a very strong mother who tended to all the wounded Katipuneros and gave them shelter in her own house. Later, she was arrested by the Spanish Guardia Civil and exiled abroad for 7 years.
Teresa Ferez was born on October 13, 1868 in Bototan, Iloilo. Known as the Visayan Joan of Arc, she led her own troops to battle against the Spanish during the Philippine Revolutionary War on August 23, 1896, and during the Filipino-American War on February 4, 1899. She is an important leader in Philippine history because she's one of the few female military leaders who fought and led the Filipinos.
Trinidad Perez, Texan, was born on March 18, 1848 in San Miguel de la Bulacan. She was one of the revolutionary women who were part of the Katipunan who fought for the country's independence from Spanish colonizers. Texan was given the name Ina ng Biak na Bato, or Mother of Biak na Bato, by Emilio Aguinaldo. Aside from physically fighting in battle, Texan was also a leader of a group of women who nursed Filipino soldiers. Because of this, she was given the name Mother of the Philippine Red Cross.
Maria Josefa Gabriela Salam and her husband Diego Salam led the rebellion against the Spanish colonial authorities in 1763 in the northern Philippines. She was born on March 15, 1721 in Caniogan, Santa Ilocos Sur. During their fight against Spanish abuses and to establish an independent Ilocano nation without colonist control, Gabriela was treated as Diego's equal and closest advisor. After Diego was assassinated, Gabriela became the face of the rebellion and earned the title Generala, or Woman General. She heroically led her troops into battle until she was captured by the Spanish and publicly hung on September 20, 1763.
Carmen Rosales was a noted actress and a World War II guerrilla fighter. Januaria Constantino Keller was born on March 3, 1917. Rosales was a superstar in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. She took up arms and joined the guerrilla movement when the Japanese invaded the Philippines in 1941. She was known to be a sharpshooter and to disguise herself as a man during the guerrilla attacks to hide her identity. Known as Maming to her fans, she rejoined the movie industry after the war and even made a movie, Guerrillera, based on the daring role she played in the Filipinos' fight for freedom.
Let me leave you with words from poet, fictionist, and teacher Lilia Quindoza Santiago, who passed away last month. Lilia, or LQS to friends, taught at the University of the Philippines and at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and authored more than 20 books. To read the last stanza of her poem, Sa Ngalan ng Ina, ng Anak, ng Diwata't Paraluman, is our host, Chris Godinez.
Kaya sa ngalan ng ina, anak, sa ngalan ng mga diwata at paraluman, iadya ako sa paglibak ng minulan, basbasan ang aking pagsasalakay sa karawagan. Pagpalain nawa ako sa taimtim na paglaban, ngayon hanggang katubusan.
I hope you liked our show. Give us your feedback. Let us know if there are topics about Philippine history that you would like us to talk about. Visit and like our Facebook page, PinoyLife.net, and tell your family and friends about us. For Talk of the Town, this is Noel Pangilinan. Salamat at ingat.
Teresa at Tandang Sora na di umasa sa luhat awa, sila'y nagsipag hawak ng sandata, nakilaban ang Midina'y lumaya.
You're mute.
Moving on, March 2021 marks the 500th anniversary of Magellan's landing in the islands, which are now part of the Republic of the Philippines. Does the Magellan landing mark the start of the colonization of the Philippines? Does it mark the beginning of Christianization of Filipinos? Was Magellan the first person who actually circumnavigated the world? Do we celebrate the Magellan's landing, or do we commemorate it as part of our collective history? Talk of the Town spoke with New York University professor Luis Francia, who answered some of these questions and put in proper perspective what actually happened in 1521. Let's take a look at this interview.
March 16, 1521.
I'm here with Professor Luis Francia. Professor Francia teaches Filipino at NYU and is the author of the book, A History of the Philippines, From Indios Bravos to Filipinos, is the author and editor of several other books on literature. Professor Francia is helping to spearhead the commemoration of the 500th year of the landing of Magellan in the Philippines. Let's ask Professor Francia what we have for this year. So here's Professor Francia. Luis, so what are we commemorating this year?
Well, as you point out, this is the 500th anniversary, 1521 to 2021, of Magellan stumbling on the then unnamed Philippines on his way to try and discover a new route to the Spice Islands. And therefore, this quote-unquote discovery was the beginning of the relationship, unequal, however, between the West and the archipelago that we now know as the Republic of the Philippines. So we are, through New York University's King Juan Carlos Center, commemorating, and I stress commemorating, not celebrating, because obviously a history of colonization is rife with pain, distortions, injustices, as well as bringing the islands into contact with the West, which is and has been a mixed blessing. So with that in mind, we have a number of programs meant for the public, one of them being a staging, virtual staging, of my play, Black Henry. As you may know, Magellan had a slave, a Malay slave, whose Christian name was Enrique. And when they get to Cebu, it turns out Enrique speaks the language of the Cebuanos, and he looks like them. So of course that has all these interesting implications. The other program is a film series curated by film historian and expert on Philippine cinema, Hil Quito. And it will be called, and is called, Visions Pananaw. And it will be jump-started with some films in the late spring, but most of the film programs will be shown next fall, all the way through the spring of 2022. And then thirdly, we are planning a webinar on the healthcare, Filipino healthcare professionals in the US and possibly in the Philippines who are affected disproportionately, at least in the US, by the virus. And this is being organized by Professor John Gershman of the Wagner School at New York University. We will begin with some films from the film series in early April.
Okay, I noticed you said that it's the 500th year of the landing of Magellan in the Philippines. Is this the same as 500th year of colonization or 500th year of Christianity in the Philippines?
Not at all. I would like to disabuse many people who often state that Christianity began and colonization began in 1521. If we remember, Magellan was killed in Mactan because he attempted to claim the islands for the crown, for the Spanish crown. And so the first attempt at colonizing at least the Visayas, and by implication the whole archipelago, was defeated. Okay, so there was no colonialization at that point in time. That began in 1565. Okay, 44 years after. In terms of Christianization, it didn't begin then either. And what people point to is the fact that, well, Magellan left a statue of the child Jesus, Santo Niño, which now reposes in the cathedral in Cebu. However, again, if we go to the historical records, the statue was found in a hut of one of the Cebuanos in 1565. There was no church, there were no practices that involved Catholicism. In fact, Manila at that point in time was really a Muslim city. Raja Sulaiman was its ruler, and in Tondo as well, and there are two sides, but interdependent. I would guess you'd call them city-states, and they were both Muslim. Okay, so it really has to be pointed out and emphasized that 1521 simply laid the groundwork for navigation. Okay, because out of the 5 ships that started in 1519, only one ship returned to Spain, and because they had a record of the voyage, after 3 more attempts, they were able finally in 1564 to send Miguel Legazpi from Mexico, and he arrives in Cebu in 1565, and thus begins in earnest the process of colonizing the archipelago. And of course, Christianity, the sword and the cross, to summarize it, the sword and the cross together begin their prominent status in what we know now as the Philippines.
Okay, so why is it important to commemorate, 1521?
Well, let me put it this way. I believe it might have been Nick Joaquin, but I'm not sure. I think, or one writer once said, Spain may have been a whore, but she was our mother. Okay. And you look, where does the name Philippines comes from? Felipe. The king of Spain, when Legazpi arrives in Cebu, was Philip, but the islands had been named Philippines, I think, in the previous voyage, when Philip was still the crown prince. So the very name that we carry, Filipinos, indicates that our beginnings are tied in to 1521. The steeds for navigating, for Spain to return to the islands, came because of the expedition of Magellan.
It's been a pleasure having Professor Francia with us tonight. So maraming salamat.
Thank you very much for having me. Salamat din sa inyo.
We will be posting the activities of the commemoration of the 500th year of the landing of Magellan in the Philippines in our Facebook page, PinoyLife.net. Chris?
Okay, so viewers, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to post your questions or comments on our chat box. We still have more features for you tonight. Please go ahead and like our page. But before anything else, let's take a moment and talk about what's going on around us now. The past year, Asian Americans have been the target of 3,800 violent incidents of hate. We strongly denounce these attacks on the Asian American community. We believe hate in all its forms has no place anywhere and should be stopped now. We urge everybody to stand in solidarity with the Asian community and to speak up against anti-Asian hate. Nair?
Yes, thank you, Chris. We'd like to remind everyone that we are still in the midst of the pandemic and that vaccines are available. So please have yourself vaccinated. And for the Pinoys, we have a little slogan, magpabakuna, wag mangamba, take your shots. So get vaccinated. That's our little PSA for tonight. But we will now move on to our next guest. Our next guest is a special education teacher who advocates for affordability, food, and nutrition at New York City. She is a born and raised New Yorker of Filipino and Jewish descent. This is her 8th year teaching special education in her district, working with kindergarten to second grade students in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. Deirdre obtained her bachelor's in public policy and master's in higher educational administration from the University of Albany, SUNY. And then when Deirdre took a class in comparative education and saw the achievement gap in New York City, she decided to serve with American Corps City Year New York, and later went on to become a New York City teaching fellow and obtained a second master's in special education with childhood education. Chris, let's welcome Deirdre Levy.
Hello, Deirdre. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me on here.
Okay, so there's so many things going on around us. It seems like it's so hard to catch up with events, and with your plans to pursue a political position, it's just inevitable that we have to confront the issues that are affecting the Asian American community. So I was wondering, as a person of Filipino descent, your thoughts on what's going on in the Asian American community right now.
Well, I think what has happened to our community, I think that there is no place for hate, like you had said earlier, that we should condemn all acts of hate, especially on our communities. And we're often seen as people who are submissive, people who are not strong enough. And I think that has to change. That I think a lot of us are organizing right now, and there are vigils that are taking place. And with our organization and sticking together in solidarity through this time, I think that we can rise above and be stronger. So I think with what's happened, we need a lot of time to process, to check in with our friends. That a lot of people have checked in with me, and I've been checking in with all of my other friends, and it's important to get a sense of how we all feel during this time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the things that are going on around us, it's been a year since the pandemic hit us. And I was wondering, what has it been like for you teaching young children for the past year? I mean, what was this, the scenario for you? Did you do remote teaching? Was it in person? And what are the specific challenges of teaching children with special needs?
I think for a lot of teachers, we've been having a very difficult time, but not just teachers, parents as well, and the students. Back in March of 2020, I lost 2 colleagues to the virus, and a lot of us were including myself, we were very upset because this should have never happened. The schools didn't close on time, but we started teaching remote during this time, and it's, there should be no reason why our teachers and students should be at risk for this virus. And now I'm teaching in person, but there have been several closures throughout the year. So there has been a lot of inconsistencies when it comes down to ensuring that my students are getting the tools that they need, because a lot of them, they depend on that consistency. And it's important when you're working with kids with special needs that things are as consistent as possible. So it's been a struggle, but I'm still going at it. I just got my second vaccine dose today. So just trying to power through and work together with my colleagues as much as it is hard.
Do you feel there's going to be an achievement gap, given that there's some inconsistencies with the implementation of the schooling of younger children? Do you think they're gonna be at a disadvantage, or they will suffer in terms of educational level?
I think right now, all in all, I think we're all going through, not just children, but adults as well. We're all going through a lot of mental health issues right now. And I think the priority right now is to focus on the social emotional aspect of learning. I know that people can say that there's achievement gaps, there's learning loss, but we don't want to think about deficit thinking right now. We want to think about how we can help our students when they come back into the classroom, right? What can we do right now to help with their social emotional development? Because it's a tough time for everyone. And I think if we focus on what the solutions can be when it comes down to helping our students with special needs, or even our students in the general education area, I think that's what we can focus on instead of thinking about that kind of deficit thinking, because there's a lot that we're all going through, and I think compassion and social emotional help right now is what's going to help all of us.
So interesting that you're pursuing a seat in the New York City Council in Brooklyn, District 35. I was just thinking of a quote from a native Brooklynite, a native of Brooklyn. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was supposed to have said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are made." And you, as a special ed teacher in the country's largest public school system, would have, I believe, would have something to bring to the table at the New York City Council. Can you tell us what your plans are, or what you would bring to the table should you be successful in getting that seat in the New York City Council in Brooklyn? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I think that there has to be more teachers that run for office. When it comes down to fixing the problems in education, a lot of people don't understand what it's like to be a teacher, what it's like to work in the classroom. And as a teacher, I think that we bring different perspectives. When it comes to my platforms, I'm all about equity in education and ensuring that all of our students, they can have access to the education that meets their individual need. You'll see that there are different schools that look differently. I worked in a school in Fort Greene that looks so different from the school that I'm teaching at now in Prospect Heights, and that shouldn't be the case. All kids should have access to good facilities, good programs, and I think that even within 2 miles of a district, there could be so many different changes, so many different facilities, and it's important to bring that kind of perspective when it comes down to making those kinds of decisions for our students and for our parents. I also, when it comes down to affordability, I was born and raised in New York City. I've lived in apartments my entire life. And I think that we're at a point where New York City is just becoming so unaffordable. And we have to make sure that if people want to live here, they need to continue to be able to afford to live in New York. And when it comes down to food security, I've been a part of my my building's gardening committee, and I am a Park Slope Food Co-op member, and I compost. And I think that we have to really focus on the localized ways where we can get access to food. We've seen during this pandemic that people have been waiting on lines because they don't have money for food. And I think that keeping it local and ensuring that there's access to nutritional food, I think that's very important. And the 3 goals that I'm focused on, equity in education, affordable housing, and food security, they all relate to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And those are some of the first 4 goals. And it's not just like a local issue, it's a global issue as well. These are our basic needs. So if we want to elect a city council member that that has our basic needs in mind, I think that's something that I want to bring into that role. So thank you for asking that.
So, Dare, do you have questions for Deirdre?
No, not questions, but a cheer. Go, Deirdre. Get that seat. Good luck. Good luck, Deirdre.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Deirdre, for sharing your views and your plans. All the best in your efforts to earn that seat in the New York City Council, District 35, Brooklyn. Okay, so moving on to our next segment, let's find out what's going on and what's coming up in the Filipino community with our Kababayan media editor, Lambert Parong. Here is Community Buzz.
Hello everyone, kumusta po kayo? I am Lambert Parong and this is Community Buzz. Tonight, We begin with Pope Francis, who marked 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines this past Sunday, March 14, with a Holy Mass in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It was in March 1521 that Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, leading a Spanish expedition, reached what is now known as the Philippines. The first Mass was held on the island of Limasawa in southern Leyte, and the Catholic community began in Cebu when locals were baptized by Father Pedro de Valderrama, the expedition's chaplain. At the Holy Mass on Sunday, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and the former Archbishop of Manila, addressed Pope Francis on behalf of the Filipino Catholic community around the globe. Also this past Sunday, in Los Angeles, her wins Song of the Year at the 2021 Grammys for I Can't Breathe. HER is an acronym for Having Everything Revealed, and is the American singer and songwriter Gabriela Sarmiento Wilson, born in California to a Filipino mother and African-American father. In New York, protesters gathered in front of the Philippine Center on Monday, March 15 to demonstrate against alleged abuses towards activists by state security forces of the Duterte administration. The demonstrators voiced their demands and calls for justice for the most recent killings and harassment from a March 7 police and military operation that resulted in 9 deaths and 6 arrests of activists in the southern Tagalog region of the Philippines. The JCI Philippine-New York recently held its 58th Induction of Officers and 2020 Presidential Gala last February 27 in a virtual event. Andrew Lewis is the new president, following Ann Constantino Beck. The chapter will be having a virtual general membership meeting tomorrow, Friday, March 19 at 8 in the evening Eastern Time. Visit JCI Philippine-New York on Facebook for more details. Another community organization, the Filipino-American National Historical Society Metro New York chapter, announced their newly elected officers for 2021 till 2023. Noel Aglubat and Isabella Villacampa are co-presidents. The Filipino-American Press Club of New York is hosting a virtual town hall featuring the 3 Filipino-Americans running for New York City Council seats in the November elections. Learn more about the candidates Marnie Halasa from Manhattan, Deirdre Levy from Brooklyn, and Stephen Raga from Queens. The virtual town hall is set for tomorrow, March 19 at 6:30 in the evening Eastern Time via Zoom. The registration link can be found at the Phil-Am Press Club of New York Facebook event page. To celebrate International Women's History Month, the Pan-American Concerned Citizens Action League will be recognizing inspiring women who have contributed to society and women who are successful in their chosen fields of endeavor. The virtual event is set for this Saturday, March 20th at 8 in the evening Eastern Time. And finally, the Philippine Consulate General in New York, in celebration of National Women's Month, invites the public to join a Filipino-American Women's Entrepreneurship Forum on Thursday, March 25th at 7 in the evening Eastern Time. Register to participate via Zoom. The forum will be live-streamed on the Consulate's Facebook page. That's it for now. I am Lambert Parong for Community Buzz. Send us your announcements. Email them to communitybuzz@pinoylife.net. Thanks and stay tuned for more.
Very much Lambert Parong, Kababayan Media Editor, for the information on what's going on in our community. But Chris, we also have one more guest, and I'd like to introduce her. Our next guest is a nurse. She's a singer. She's a commercial model, print ad model, and an actress who has successfully combined nursing with her entertainment career. She dabbled on TV. She was on Guiding Light, one of the longest running, or in fact the longest running soap opera, and then she was also on Broadway and what's this, Crazy for You and Anything Goes. She also won the MTV International It Pick contest singing, and she also was in several shows in the Philippines. Aside from that, she performs everywhere in New York, and but she actually graduated with a degree in nursing from the University of the Philippines, and she's also had her master's in Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. But now she currently works in the COVID-19 unit at the Riverside Nursing Home, Upper West Side in Manhattan. And she is also currently the Individual Development Vice President of the JTI Philippine New York. Please join me in welcoming Krizia Daya.
Hi, Krizia. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome to Talk of the Town. I have one quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
Why nursing when you're so active in the entertainment industry already?
Because mommy and daddy told me.
Good that you took their advice. But seriously, Chris.
Yeah. I was
Krizia,
wondering, Krizia, before anything else, I just want to thank you for the work that you do. It must be, I can only imagine how tough it must have been for you. Tell me, what was it like the past year? I mean, most of us started getting off the in-person work right about this time last year. So a lot of us marked the first year of dealing with the pandemic. So in your case, what has it been like the past year?
Honestly, it's been more of a runaway train for us because all of a sudden we were just in the middle of this pandemic, and it was hard because it wasn't just the patients who were getting sick, it was the staff members who were getting sick. So, I would take extra shifts. I mean, we would all take extra shifts. And then it's horrible when one of your own is really sick. And we actually lost a few staff members as well. And even now, I think a third of our staff is out with COVID. It's hard when you try so hard for so many people and then you still lose them. I mean, it's not really anyone's fault. It's a pandemic, but we do what we can, and we've really just been working. I haven't had a vacation for about a year, so I mean, I'm hoping that the vaccine will really make a difference, and that all of this social distancing that we've been practicing, I hope it really sinks into people so that I can finally go on vacation.
Yeah, you deserve one. You deserve one. But Krizia, my question is, with the patients in the nursing home, do you have any patients who are resistant to taking the vaccine?
Of course. I mean, a lot of people, even staff members, I mean, people are people. It doesn't matter if you're a patient, what role you have, or what age you are, you will always have concerns because it's still emergency use authorization, I think. It's not actually FDA approved. There are always side effects. And what we found is with staff members, even who are younger, as well as the patients, the second dose, everyone gets some kind of side effect, and some worse than others, that people are out for a while. So, I mean, I understand completely if anyone is afraid to take the vaccine, but it's always recommended to just do it because it's an extra layer of protection. This is the best that we can do now, so we should.
All right. Wow. So
spoken like a
yeah, in your line of work in the nursing homes, do you also put on PPEs, like you're all wearing protective gear up until this point?
Oh yeah, it's so hard actually, and I get migraines often, and even more now because so I am on the COVID unit. So the N95s, we do fit testing every Wednesday just to make sure that it still fits and everything. You can't breathe in those, and especially if there are emergency cases. For example, the other day, someone's oxygen saturation, it just went down to the 60s. No matter what we did, we couldn't get it back up, so she had to go. I had to call 911, get her out to an acute care unit in the hospital. So, and all that time I was running around in the N95, and you can't really breathe in that. But PPE, since last year, it's gotten so much better because there are regular, I guess we're more prepared for all of the changes that we need with the PPEs, like for each patient, how many times you're going to go into the room. So the nursing home has accommodated for that finally. And all of the staff members have enough PPEs finally, but it's not easy. It's like working in 100-degree heat all the time.
Oh, wow.
Krizia, question. It's like, being that you're so busy in your nursing career, like, of course, you have to sometimes do extra shifts because a lot of are sick and some can't come in, but and you said you really, really need a vacation. So other than your nursing career, do you still have time to perform, or Do I know I know you're with the JCI Philippine New York. So
Mm,
that's a very, very, you know,
it's
busy
demanding.
chapter. So are you busy with the chapter as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love them, and it's actually so Andrew Luis. He was one of my bandmates before, and so I'm really trying to support him as much as I can. They understand if like I can't come to a meeting or something, but everything is online now, so it makes it easier. As for online gigs, we usually do a Thursday night live session. We'll probably go live after this.
Wow.
Okay.
Right. So we try to fit everything in. But under IDVP, what we found during the pandemic is a lot of people didn't really know how to cook. They didn't know how to deal with not having 2 a.m. delivery. So one of our IDVP things, individual development projects for the year, is to do a cooking series. So we're getting people like Ice Kitchen, Chef Cecile Lai, and a lot of other people whose businesses have really grown during COVID. We're getting them to show a little bit of something, whatever secret they can share about cooking, and show us how to cook. Maybe lumpiang Shanghai. Our first episode was on making pasta. And as for the music thing, yeah, I mean, live streams. I was on the Wish Bus, but that was like SoCal distancing, so we did it remotely instead of being on the actual bus. And then we did like PHLV radio. Also, a lot of people have switched to online, so it's been much easier.
Great. Attorney Chris, we have a very special treat for everybody. Krizia will be performing for us tonight, and it's the world premiere of her music video. Krizia, we'd like to thank you. And I think this is our treat for all the women, since it's Women's Month. And this is the title of the video is, Krizia, would you like to tell us? And
Sure. This is for all of the women. Growing up, one of my idols was Gwen Stefani. This is Just a Girl. It's a cover, our version of No Doubt, Just a Girl. I want to thank Shelly Maggs and Pink Flowers Productions for putting this together.
ladies and gentlemen, the world premiere video of Krizia Daya, Just a Girl.
Of my eyes, I'm exposed, and it's no big surprise. Don't you think I know exactly where I stand? This world is forcing me to hold your hand, 'cause I'm just a girl. Oh, little old me. Well, don't let me out of your sight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Krizia. That was an excellent video and very nice song choice. Congratulations. We loved it. And thank you for allowing us to do the world premiere of that
Premiere it
video.
here.
Yeah. Chris, I think we're about to wrap up our episode.
We're wrapping up,
tonight.
but before we wrap up,
Let's call on our guests.
yes, I'd like to call on our guests for your parting shot, so to speak. Well, last words for our viewers. Let's start with Miss Evelina Gala.
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight and for commemorating International Women's History Month. And all the women here tonight and the ones who are watching, and especially the Lolas. Thank you for everything. Let's keep it up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Evelina. Deirdre Levy, can you please, your final message to our viewers?
Yeah, thank you so much for having all of us on here. It's great to be with Evelina and Krizia. You guys are amazing. And it's great to celebrate with all the women that are watching as well. So thank you.
Yes. And Krizia Daya, your parting shot, please. Thank you for that wonderful song.
Thank you, Nair. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Deirdre. Good luck. Thank you, Evelina. Thank you, Lambert. Thank you, JCI. Thank you, Shelly Mags. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to all the women just for being. Thank you.
Yes. So, we are wrapping up tonight's episode, Women on the March. Our thanks to Evelina Galang, Deirdre Levy, Krizia Daya, and the students of the College of Mount St. Vincent who participated in our segment on Women in History. You can tell your friends that they can watch a recording of this episode on Facebook.com/PinoyLife.net. And you can also like and comment on our chat box and watch the episode on YouTube. And we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you want us to feature in our future episodes. Nair?
Yeah, we'd also like to thank Professor Luis Francia for that insightful perspective on Magellan in the Philippines. We also would like to thank you, our viewers and listeners, who continue to support us and provide us with feedback and for actively promoting Talk of the Town. And who else? Of course, our friends and family. Thank you. We'd also like to thank Philippine Daily Mail editor Richard Rillera for Balitaan, and of course, Professor Noel Pangilinan for our History Rewind, and of course, Attorney Chris Godinez for ITIS, and Lambert Parong from Kababayan Media for Community Buzz, and of course, in our broadcasting studio, Ralph Thompson and Jay Acuña for taking care of us. And on behalf of our Talk of the Town, this is Nair Martinez bidding you a good night. And until then, come and talk to us.
Paalam!
Paalam! Thank you, ladies! guys were awesome.